Hey, what's up, friends? It's me, Vindy Vondo, everyone's favorite rat, with 2 videos. Now I've shaved, you can see. So now you can see my double chin easier. Here we are now talking about a new topic this time. I don't know what's wrong with me. Okay. So, we all know, what coronavirus, COVID is. It's the current virus, pandemic, global pandemic, I guess is the correct term for it that everyone's been using. And it's been kind of everywhere, fucking up everyone's lives, everyone's tired of this bullshit quarantine. Everyone wants it to end. And it's been a big factor, just in everyone's lives, I think, these last like 2 months or so. But the one thing I don't see people talk about it in direct terms, but I don't think people are really kind of fully talking about it. And I think it's just interesting to talk about, so I wanted to make a video on the way that I think coronavirus is affecting all different types of media and entertainment. Because there's some really interesting stuff going on and some stuff that I don't think will ever be the same because of it. And I think some of that comes down to, when you look at how quickly human entertainment and media has grown with technology. So, if you want to look at the Spanish influenza, right? People still just read books back then for fun, right? That's all you're going to do, right? Is, read books and, beat the shit out of some guy, right? Those are the only 2 ways to have fun in life in the 1920s. But when you look at, today, there's so many avenues with television, and video games and internet. There's so many more avenues and ways for people to get certain kinds of entertainment. Even comic books didn't even fucking exist, right? Really, in any they did exist, but they weren't kind of a thing until after that. So it's interesting because when you look at the way that things have changed, I think that this pandemic causes some really interesting things to happen. So one of the things I want to just talk about is just to start with is movie theaters, because that's something where movie theaters and then anything that you have to go somewhere for, right? So sporting events. I'm going to mention wrestling as well because that's something that happened with. But I'll start with movies because I think there's been some really interesting stuff. So, there was the whole thing where Mulan, I guess, released, but then got pushed back, but then it kind of released, but then it didn't make any money when it released because nobody went and saw it. And then there was, the Trolls thing, which I think is more interesting to talk about. And then, you can bring it up with, Artemis Fowl and, what's the other one? Scoob are 2 other movies. So all of these movies are doing a digital release as opposed to, there were movies that got pushed back, right? Fast 9 got pushed back to next year. Mulan ended up getting pushed back to July. But, Trolls, Scoob, and Artemis Fowl, for example, are 3 movies that instead they got pushed to a digital release. And what's interesting about Trolls is Trolls did really well. Here's a thing we can see. AMC theaters will no longer play Universal movies after Trolls World Tour's on-demand success. And when you look at this, you can see, that there is, they mentioned that they did really well, and now Universal movies aren't even being shown at AMC theaters. Because NBC Universal was well, it did so well that we realized not all movies need to be in theaters. And I think this is one example of one of the things that we'll talk about the long-lasting effects we can see from coronavirus on the way we get certain media. Because I think, the one thing that this has shown us, I think more than anything, is that the internet allows us to connect with things, I think, more, because people like to sit in the old ways, right? I still like to go to the movie theaters. I think it's fun. But, there really isn't that much of a need for it, outside of the experience. And I think that that's kind of what this is also showing, is that if you go for these digital releases, people that don't want to go to the theaters might still just buy your fucking movie, right? There's no reason that they can't just buy whatever you're putting out if you're doing these digital releases. So that's really interesting. And there's some other ones that I want to talk about as we keep going, but I also want to talk about wrestling because that's something that I've been watching, and they're in these empty arena shows, right? And so, sports, also all the main sports are baseball, I'm pretty sure right after opening day got axed. I know basketball is just done. The XFL was the other football league that Vince McMahon was trying to do. It had to go bankrupt because it was their inaugural season and it had to get cut short, And so all these sports are being affected, and all these things where people have to go are being affected. And I think that what's interesting about specifically with the sports is they're just done, right? NASCAR's doing that weird they're doing simulation driving, which is weird, and I'm not going to talk about that because I don't follow NASCAR. I don't really know. I mean, I know that one guy said the N-word, but I don't follow it closely enough to really talk about NASCAR. But I think with wrestling it's interesting because the one way that it has impacted wrestling is they had that Boneyard match. And that was, they did this, cinematic kind of match where they, it was like a movie kind of thing. And that was interesting, and that's something that they're doing again for Money in the Bank. It's going to be this whole cinematic match. And I think what's interesting about that is, like, that's a new thing that wrestling hasn't, like, really done before in that kind of way that they can continue to do in the future now, if they wanted, Not that they're necessarily going to, because I think when you can do wrestling, like an actual match in front of a crowd, they'd probably generally rather do that. But now they're having to be really creative with what they're doing, right? Like this Money in the Bank idea of starting on the ground floor of WWE headquarters and the briefcases are at the top, suspended from the top of the building, is like a really interesting creative idea. And that's something that now they're able to do, and they're doing because of what's been going on. And because they need to try to keep it fresh with no crowd. So that's just like some examples of some stuff in terms of where people have to go. But I think even in terms of like, when we talk about video games, has been really interesting for a couple reasons. So before we talk about games that got delayed, which I do want to bring up the list because there's a lot and it's kind of insane. I do want to mention Animal Crossing New Leaf. Right here, Animal Crossing. Oh shit. Because that's a game that I was really excited for as an Animal Crossing fan, right? Like New Leaf's one of my favorite games of all time. I was gonna buy it and play it anyways. But I think something really interesting happened with Animal Crossing where, because of the kind of game it is, where it is very chill and relaxing and it kind of helps de-stress you, and just by chance, the timing of Animal Crossing was perfect. Because, let me look up when it was. If you look, right, the release date of Animal Crossing was March 20th, By February, the U.S. had cases. By mid-March, it was in all 50 states. And so by the time the game came out, everyone was in lockdown, right? Everyone was stuck at home all day. People were scared about the virus. People didn't know what was going on. And I think what makes that interesting is Animal Crossing, in a way, was like the perfect kind of game to play there, right? You could run around, you could talk to these villagers, you could do just kind of these mundane things in a really relaxing game. And I also think it's the kind of game where you can put 100 hours into in a similar way to other kinds of games like it, right? Like, I know Stardew Valley is a game people like for that. Minecraft is another game that comes to mind as that. Where I think there are these games where, because you kind of make your own goals in certain ways, it's something where, like, Doom, a lot of people bought. But people finish Doom and then it's like, what do I do? Do I play it again, And so people who really like the game are going to play it again. But once you finish the game, there's nothing to do. You could put 300 hours into Animal Crossing and still find things you want to do, right? Whether it's you want to complete the museum, you want to upgrade your house, you want to make your island look a certain way. And so I think that the game came out at such a perfect time almost, where people also were just at home. And so maybe people who wouldn't have bought the game ended up deciding to, right? Because, oh, well, I have nothing to do. Here's this game coming out that people have been talking about. It looks kind of fun. I might buy it, right? And so they decide to buy it because what else are they going to do with their time? And then because everyone is playing this game because they have literally nothing else to do, right? Like nobody's working, nobody's, going out with friends. I think that Animal Crossing became this massive thing in the end of March, beginning of April, where it felt like everyone was talking about Animal Crossing, People were playing it as their first game. I know a bunch of people who bought it a week after it came out because everyone was just talking about it, because what else was there to talk about? And so I think that that's super cool, because I would love to see, in a parallel universe where Animal Crossing comes out and there is no coronavirus, how big is it, right? Obviously, people would be talking about it. A lot of people would have been playing it. I don't think it would have done as well. And I don't think it would have become this almost cultural landmark. Animal Crossing is what got everyone through the early parts of the lockdown. Or not everyone, obviously, but a lot of people used Animal Crossing as this way to cope because of the kind of game it is. And because of, how big it was and the fact that everyone was playing it to cope through this early lockdown. And so it became this thing where, on Twitter, it felt like everyone was talking about Animal Crossing. And everyone was playing Animal Crossing. Which is really interesting. Because I think that, a lot of what we're talking about, and I think Trolls is kind of an example as well, but a lot of what we'll talk about is things get pushed back, or don't get exposure, or get canceled, because of coronavirus. But Animal Crossing is really unique because that's an example of something being like propped up, right? Because of coronavirus, now Animal Crossing is a bigger thing than it would have been. And there are other examples of things doing this, right? Like, you know, there have been sales on, you know, digital media, right? A bunch of game sales. Games are constantly being made free forever to own if you just click it now, right? Because of the virus. You know, Viz is making a bunch of the digital vaults of open because of the coronavirus. And so this is something that's been happening, but I think that, again, specifically, Animal Crossing is unique because it got elevated to this level that I don't think Animal Crossing would have ever been if it wasn't for this lockdown. So it's just really cool, and I wanted to mention that as like a key point in this video because I think it's the only thing like it that I can think of. If you know another one, let me know in the comments, but that's the only thing I can think of that like became this thing because of its situation and because of the time it came out in. Because like I was still able to go pick up Animal Crossing in stores, right? I walked in the store and got it. And that's not even to mention like people were selling Doom and Animal Crossing, you know, a day early. Like I got both a day early because they wanted to keep people from all barging in the stores at once. So, you know, that's one thing. But now I want to talk about some of the game releases. I just have a list up here, and I think they're worth mentioning, right? So, yeah, The Outer Worlds for Nintendo Switch, Someday You'll Return, Hellpoint, Trackmania, The Wonderful 101 Remastered, Sword Art Online Alicization, Death Stranding for PC, Wasteland 3, Last of Us Part 2, Ghost of Tsushima, Little Witch Academia VR, Iron Man VR, Dragon Marked for Death, Monster Hunter World Iceborne Title Update 4, you know, Final Fantasy VII Remake was shipped early. There's a lot of games, you know, it's interesting to me still that Final Fantasy VII Remake came out, right? They're like, we're coming out whether you want us or not. We're coming, bitch. I think they got delayed a little bit, but it still came out. It's interesting because now these things are pushed back because of that. You know, and there's some big games there, right? Last of Us Part 2, Ghost of Tsushima, two big titles for Sony. Wonderful 101 Remastered is Platinum's first, you know, publishing experience, massive Kickstarter, things that people are excited for. And another topic to just mention, because I'm not sure what the word is out on it yet, but like, how is this going to affect the new consoles coming out, right? Because obviously part of this is that they want to release the game at a time where everyone can buy it, but part of it is if these games aren't finished, like, the teams are split up, right? Even if they're working from home, it's slower because you have to deal with communication barriers. And just the fact that people are working at home means that progress is slowed and you're not going to be able to get things done as quickly as you could in person. So they have to push these back and give them time to develop, which means more money goes into the game, which means that some of these are probably, you know, it's going to be harder for them to successfully release. As well, we have new consoles at the end of the year. And if factories that they're being made in are shut down, they might not have inventory. So even if we get console releases at the end of this year, what's the inventory going to be like? Are they going to have enough for everyone to get them? Or is it going to be like the Wii was in 2006 or the Switch was when that first released, where you can't find them? I think that's something that's interesting to bring up and is an interesting part of the debate or discussion, I guess, that people don't really bring up. Is how is this going to affect the new consoles? I think it's going to be really interesting. I think that, like, no matter what, either they get delayed or there's inventory issues. I don't think there's a world where they come out and everything's like nothing happened. But that's it for games. Now I want to talk about, you know, the other thing, because there's more I could go into more specifically. Well, actually, no, there is something else with games I really wanted to talk about, which is E3 got canceled. Which E3 was already kind of rough this year because Sony wasn't going, and there were already people who had dropped out of E3. So I think what's interesting now is we're getting this, Jeff Keighley's doing this, like, digital summer event, right? Which has some really interesting things that I think might, like, I was already saying when, like, E3 got canceled this year, E3's probably dead. But now I'm starting to think that E3 might actually be dead. Because originally I was saying as a joke, because I think E3 is dying because of leaks and because of all these things. And so I think that there's a high chance that we start getting people, you know, Xbox is probably going to keep doing its Inside Xbox. We'll probably keep seeing State of Plays, and we'll probably forever get Nintendo Directs. But what's interesting now is because of this digital event going on, which if you don't know, there's this big digital event that's happening. I don't know what it's called. There's this new E3. And one of the things that I'm pretty sure they're doing is like allowing you to download demos of these games and try them out at home, which is something that most people don't get to do during E3, right? They just have to watch the gameplay. But now we can try this pre-alpha gameplay, which I think is so interesting because it means that, like, every person on the planet who streams is going to be streaming this shit, right? They're going to be streaming these new games, trying them out. There's going to be so much word out on some of these games. And it also means that, like, games that, like, are really fun that nobody would have tried out, that people try out, that get really big, are going to be huge, right? Like, there's going to be games that get talked about now because of this, like, digital event that wouldn't have been talked about at all in the past. That, like, it's so interesting to see, and I'm so excited to try it out and probably stream a lot of these games and, you know, try them out for myself. So that's something that, like, is so fucking cool and interesting. Because there were events that were canceled, right? EVO's doing online, which is, you know, and the esports games, right? Like, the League of Legends Pro Series, like the LCS and the LEC, started doing them online, and then they canceled MSI, the big mid-year event, and pushed that to a later date. There are other examples of, like, esports events going online, or just canceling outright. Everything's kind of in disarray, and I think that a lot of things, when we look back and talk about 2020, there's going to be a lot of asterisks next to a lot of things that have happened for the first part of this year as, well, yes, that's the thing, but also we have to remember that it was during coronavirus, so things weren't completely normal then. And so, like, it's going to be really, really interesting to see the way that, what does E3 do next year? If this, you know, big event that he's joining, this E3, does really well, well, now, if that happens, right, and it does really well, next year, do they do it again? What does E3 do? Like, do they compete? Or does E3 just back off and says, okay, we're done, no more E3, and now there's just this? It's really interesting, and because now all these people are going to have to do digital shows, I think the chances of leaks are going to be less, because a lot of the leaks we get are from people at E3, or, you know, there's so many more people that go into this big physical event, that I think in these digital events, there will be less of that. So it's really interesting to see. You know, I mean, I think Nintendo's just had less leaks since we started doing directs. So, I mean, yeah, it's really interesting to see. Then the last one to talk about it is, you know, anime and manga. So I should have pulled this up thinking about it now, but like a list of anime that got delayed due to coronavirus. I could just name some off the top of my head, like ReZero was supposed to be this season, got pushed to next. I think SAO was the season, got pushed to next. There are a few others, I think. A lot of shows now, we don't know what's going on with them. There's another one that I was really excited for. Is ReZero. There's another one I think we were going to watch for the Weeb Club, but I can't remember it now. Yeah, but there were a couple of anime that were supposed to come out that got pushed. And they completely got pushed because the staff couldn't get together and work. And now even, like, Jump, we see, is doing these, you know, double issues, right? Like, take a week off and do a double issue. And so I wonder how much of that is because, and obviously, you know, I'm not a mangaka, I don't talk to mangaka, but, like, how much of this is because they can't, like, they have to be safe, right? So I assume if they're either, you know, they're probably working from home, a lot of them, and not all getting together. So is there, like, is it hard to communicate between assistants and, you know, the actual mangaka now? If they're not in person, you can't really show them what you want. Are there communication issues? So it's taking longer to get past those. And, you know, I think there's a lot of things that, just to talk about, like, you know, it's harder, obviously, to make manga during all this, because you can't really just stuff, like, you know, 5 or 6 people in a room all day and just have them make manga, especially now that Japan's also, I'm pretty sure, under lockdown. And, you know, there's also the, like, One Piece. Oda said a while ago, you know, I'm going to take more breaks than normal because I want to keep my staff safe. So this is, like, a big thing where now, you know, manga's getting delayed, or Jump, you know, every other week, right? Like, Jump is every other week. I don't know how much longer. I think right now it's until they're not. So, again, like, this is something that's affecting all these things. And I think Jump and manga is probably the one that it's going to have the least amount of impact on as a whole. I think one thing that could be interesting is the idea, like, a lot of One Piece is now free to read in Japan as well as, like, here. So maybe more people get into the series in the lockdown, but I don't think that it's going to have as long-lasting effects on the anime or manga industry as it might on games or movies, where I really see, like, there will be a long-lasting effect on the games industry because of how this could affect doing things digitally. And I think movies as well. If Universal really go through with this, and then they really get shut out of AMC theaters, which is the largest theater chain in America, I really see there being a massive change in the movie industry. And so I think that's like the most interesting thing is, where are we going to see these long-lasting changes? And so that's why I wanted to make this video now, to bring a lot of these up, so that in a couple years we can look back and think, okay, this is what the thoughts were now, but we don't need... I don't know. I wanted to bring these up because I think it's going to be really interesting, and I want to see where it goes from here. Obviously, this quarantine isn't over. Some states are coming off lockdown, but there's always danger of another lockdown in the future. What happens if the virus comes back next November, when the consoles are supposed to come out, and we have to go back into lockdown because there's no vaccine yet? So I think that, like, these are things to keep conscious of, and if we do end up going into a full second lockdown after this first one, that's something that I think is really important to look into, is how has this affected stuff, and where do we kind of go from here? Obviously, you know, I'm not going to talk a lot about, you know, I didn't talk at all about the virus or any of that shit. I'm not smart enough. I don't know enough. I'm not some fucking doctor, man. I just talk about video games and shit. Pay attention to those. So, I just thought it was kind of an interesting topic, the idea of the way that coronavirus is affecting our media and our media enjoyment, especially because a lot of people have more time now for media, right? Another example of something I wanted to bring up was, like, YouTubers, I feel, not necessarily the ones who, like, work in, like, big studios, but a lot of, like, the YouTubers who do their stuff at their house or whatever, I feel that's one place that they haven't slowed down, because why would they need to, right? If anything, there's more, because some of them who have jobs to do other things have more time now. So there's more time, there's more people looking for things to do, so they end up watching more digital content. I think that's another aspect where YouTubers have just kept going throughout this, whereas a lot of these other things have slowed down. You know, a lot of productions like TV and movies that are currently being worked on had to just stop production for the time being. But YouTube doesn't have that, and it was able to just keep going like normal through this. I think that's something, wanted to talk about it, but that's really all I have to say. So, with that being said, I'll see you guys. Thank you guys for watching. You know, if you want to hear more of me talking, subscribe to the channel. I'll do more kind of just videos like this. I want to do different kinds of stuff as well. If you want to hear me talk with other people, there's the Weeb Club, where I talk with What the What in Craftsdorf, and then obviously I have a Twitter and a Twitch where I stream, and I do my chapter review streams, as well as sometimes I'll stream video games, so you guys can check that out, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.